I'll never forget the way my daughter looked at me that day, not with anger, not with confusion, but with this calm, quiet kind of sadness, like she understood something the rest of us hadn't yet figured out. It was my sister's birthday. Kaylin, my mom's favorite. Now, I know you're not supposed to say that. You're not supposed to admit that favoritism exists in a family, especially when you're the other child. But it's true. It's always been true. And somehow, over the years, I learned to live with it. But what happened that day? I don't think I'll ever live that down. We were all gathered at my mom's house. Me, my daughter Elira, my sister Kaylin, and a few cousins. The usual crew. My mom, Marion, had insisted on throwing a little party. She does it every year for Kaylin. Balloons, decorations, cake, the whole thing. You'd think Kaylin was turning 16 every year, not 32. Anyway, I wasn't going to go at first. Elira had been sick earlier that week, and I didn't want to push her, but she was the one who said, "No, I want to go. I made Grandma a present." That stopped me. I asked, "You made a present? For Grandma? On Aunt Kaylin's birthday?" She nodded, holding up this tiny wrapped box, gold wrapping paper with a white ribbon. She'd been working on it in secret all week. I didn't ask too many questions. She was proud of it, and I figured maybe my mom would appreciate the thought. God, how wrong I was. We got to my mom's house around 3. Elira clung to my hand, like she always does when she's unsure. She's only 7, but you'd swear she could read people better than most adults. She knew how the energy felt in that house. She always knows. Kaylin greeted us at the door, soaking up compliments like sunlight. "You look amazing, Kaylin." "Oh, I love your dress, Kaylin." My mom was buzzing around her like a bee on caffeine, fussing over her, adjusting her necklace, smoothing her hair, laughing like everything Kaylin said was comedy gold. We sat down, made small talk. Elira stayed quiet beside me, her gift box clutched in her lap. No one really noticed her. They never do. She's the type of kid who blends into corners unless she's deliberately trying not to. And then dessert came. That's when everything shifted. Mom came out of the kitchen holding a tray. A big, beautiful cake sat right in the middle. White frosting, chocolate layers, little pink flowers. It was obviously store-bought, but expensive looking. Mom had written, "Happy Birthday, Princess Kaylin," in gold letters on the top. She handed out slices. 1 to Kaylin, 1 to me, 1 to everyone else. Then she turned to Elira, and I swear to you, she didn't miss a beat. She placed a small plate in front of my daughter. But it wasn't cake. It wasn't anything sweet. It was ice. Crushed ice. Like the kind you scoop out of a freezer drawer. A little clear pile sitting on a white plate. No explanation. No joke. No apology. Elira looked at it, then looked up at her grandmother. Why? And my mother just smiled. Not kindly, not gently. She said, "You need to learn about hardship, sweetheart. Not everything in life comes with frosting and candles." I blinked. I thought I'd misheard her, but she wasn't joking. I looked at my daughter, this little girl with her hands folded in her lap, still holding that tiny gold box, and my stomach twisted. She didn't cry. She didn't pout or complain. She just nodded. "Okay, Grandma," she whispered. Everyone laughed. Not loud, just those awkward, polite chuckles. Kaylin rolled her eyes like Elira was being dramatic. No one defended her, not even me. I should have said something right then. I should have stood up and taken my daughter home, but I froze. I froze the way kids freeze when their own parents shame them in public. I leaned down and said, "You okay?" And she looked up at me, her eyes soft and full of something ancient and far too grown up for a 7-year-old. Then she said quietly, "Can I give Grandma my gift now?" And right then, I knew something was about to happen. Something that none of us could take back. I never meant to raise my daughter the opposite of how I was raised. It just happened. My name's Talia. I'm 36, a single mom, and depending on who you ask, either too soft or just doing my best in a world that doesn't always make sense. I've spent most of my adult life walking the tightrope between protecting my daughter and not disappointing my own mother. It's harder than it sounds. My mom, Marion, is the kind of woman who thinks emotions are something you outgrow. She came from the kind of childhood where you didn't cry unless you were bleeding, and even then, only if it was bad. She raised me the same way. Love, in her eyes, was discipline. Tough love. No excuses, no softness. She didn't hit us, she never had to. Her silence could split you in two. Her disappointment could bend steel. And then there's my sister, Kaylin. If I was the trial run, Kaylin was the polished version. The one who got the hair bows, the praise, the second chances. She was always good at being the favorite. Charming, pretty, agreeable when it mattered. And Mom adored her. Still does. I used to think I was imagining it, until I had Alyra. My daughter, Alyra, is 7 now. But even when she was little, I knew she was different. She's one of those kids who feel everything. You know the type. She notices when someone else is sad, even if they're smiling. She'll give her last sticker to a crying classmate. She'll ask me why people lie when they say they're fine. She's pure-hearted, thoughtful in a way that sometimes takes my breath away. And I'll admit it, I shield her. I protect her, maybe more than I should. Not because she's fragile, but because I know the world will try to make her harder, colder, sharper, just like it did to me. But there's one person who can't protect her from completely: my mother. Alyra doesn't know the full story. She only knows that Grandma Marion is difficult. She's polite to her, always, respectful, but she also keeps her distance. My mom doesn't do softness. She doesn't say, "I love you," and she rarely smiles at Alyra unless it's part of some performance in front of other adults. Still, Alyra made her a gift. The week before Kaylin's birthday, I noticed her working at the kitchen table after school. Tongue stuck out in concentration, crayons scattered everywhere, glitter on her cheeks. I thought she was making a birthday card for Kaylin, but when I asked, she said, "Nope, it's for Grandma." I was surprised, honestly. I asked why, and she said, "Because she misses Grandpa. I want to make her smile." That stopped me cold. My dad passed away 3 years ago. Alyra was just 4, but they were close. He was the only person who made space for her in that house. He used to sneak her peppermints and sing lullabies in his gravelly baritone. After he passed, something in my mom hardened even more. She started talking about being realistic, not raising a snowflake, and learning to cope. I never told Alyra that. I never said any of that out loud, but somehow she felt it. She knew. The day of Kaylin's birthday came. I dressed Alyra in her favorite lilac dress. She tied her hair in a ribbon and held that gold-wrapped gift like it was a treasure. I asked one more time, "Are you sure you want to go?" She nodded. So we drove to my childhood home, a small ranch house tucked at the edge of town. It always felt colder inside than it should. The living room was still covered in beige carpet that hadn't changed since the 90s, with picture frames lining the walls, every one of Kaylin or the grandkids who weren't mine. When we walked in, I could feel it right away. That familiar hierarchy. Kaylin was the star, Mom the director, and everyone else an audience. Alyra and I? Just background. Alyra sat quietly, clutching her gift box. I wanted to tell her we didn't have to stay, that we could just leave, go get pizza, do something fun. But I kept quiet. I always keep quiet around my mother. I don't know why I thought this time would be different. She was only 7, but she already understood the rules of the room better than I ever did. Smile. Sit still. Don't speak unless spoken to. And yet, she still brought that gift, a quiet offering of love to someone who never showed her much in return. Looking back now, I realize that box was more than a gift. It was a test, not for Alyra, but for the rest of us. And we were about to fail it. The dinner itself was fine. Polite conversation, half-warm smiles, everyone pretending this was a happy occasion. But even then, I could feel it building. Something off. Something brewing just beneath the surface. Kaylin was glowing. She always is when she's the center of attention. She wore a coral wrap dress, full makeup, gold earrings that sparkled every time she tilted her head to laugh at one of Mom's comments. She always knew how to perform, and Mom loved her for it. I don't even think Kaylin realizes how much of her personality is shaped by the applause she's learned to expect. Alyra sat next to me, quiet as ever. She didn't complain, didn't fidget. She just watched, studied. She's got these huge hazel eyes, the kind that seem to take in every detail, and she used them like mirrors, reflecting the energy around her. Her little gift box was still in her lap, untouched. She held it like something sacred. My mom floated from chair to chair, refilling drinks, complimenting Kaylin's job promotion. "You deserve it, honey. You've worked so hard," and making passive-aggressive jabs in my direction. "Still doing the part-time hours, Talia? Must be nice to have so much free time." I didn't respond. I never do. Not anymore. When dinner wrapped up, she clapped her hands together like she was calling a class to attention. "All right, who's ready for dessert?" Alira perked up a little. Just slightly. She loves cake, especially chocolate. I could see that flicker of excitement cross her face just for a second. She didn't say anything, but I saw it, and I wish I hadn't, because what came next? I still can't believe it happened. Mom walked back in, holding a tray. Right in the center was a picture-perfect cake, tall, layered with thick white frosting and gold lettering across the top. "Happy birthday, Princess Kaylin!" Real gold flakes, too. I could tell. Probably cost more than my weekly groceries. She served Kaylin first, of course, a big slice. Then the cousins, then me. And then she turned to Alera, and she placed a white dessert plate in front of her, but there was no cake. It was a plate of crushed ice. Not sculpted, not fancy. Just freezer ice. Sharp, jagged chunks melting into a shallow puddle. No explanation, no smile, just ice. Alira stared at it, then looked at my mom. "Why?" she asked so softly I almost didn't hear it. And my mom said calmly, "Because not every child needs cake, sweetheart. You need to learn hardship. Life isn't fair, and the sooner you understand that, the better." That was it. That was the moment the room went still. Nobody said anything. Not my sister, not the cousins, not even me. Alira didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She just looked down at the ice like she was trying to understand how it made sense, like she was doing the emotional math and coming up short. I looked around the table. Kaylin had this weird smile on her face, like she thought it was a joke, or maybe she didn't care. The others were quiet, shifting in their seats, pretending not to see it. I felt my fists clench under the table. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to shout. But years of silence don't break easily, not when they're inherited. I leaned down and whispered, "Are you okay?" She nodded, still looking at the ice. And then she looked up at me and said, "Can I give Grandma my gift now?" That was the moment everything inside me cracked. This child, this soft, sweet girl who had just been humiliated in front of her family, still wanted to give her gift, still wanted to be kind, still believed that maybe, just maybe, love would be enough to make someone like my mother soften, even a little. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. She picked up her little box, wrapped in gold paper, tied with a white ribbon, and stood up. Everyone turned to look at her. She walked toward my mom, slowly, carefully. And for the first time that entire day, my mother looked unsure, because this wasn't part of the script. Alira held out the box. "For you, Grandma." My mom hesitated, took it without smiling. The room held its breath, and that's when the real story began. There was something about the way Alira stood in front of my mother, holding out that little gold box that made the entire room fall silent. She didn't say anything else. She didn't explain. She just waited. She looked so small, 7 years old, barely past my mom's waist, her hair tied back in that lavender ribbon she picked out herself. Her hands were steady. Her eyes, wide, clear, unblinking, were fixed on Marion, like she was offering a second chance instead of a present. And maybe, in a way, she was. My mother didn't move right away. You could tell she didn't know what to make of it. She was caught off guard. My mother is never caught off guard. She looked at Alira, then at me, back at the box, and finally, slowly, she reached out and took it. There was a moment where I actually held my breath, not because I thought something magical was about to happen, but because I was terrified that my mom might mock it. Say something like, "You didn't have to do this," in that tone that meant, "You shouldn't have." Or worse, open it, glance inside, and toss it aside like a piece of scrap paper. But she didn't open it right away. She just held it. And in that silence, Kaylin muttered under her breath, "What is it? A drawing?" I shot her a look, and for once she looked away. Everyone else stayed quiet, watching. There was a stillness I hadn't felt in that house in years. Like every wall, every framed photo, every person in that room was holding their breath with me. Alira stood there, waiting, And then my mother sat down slowly in her chair and started unwrapping the ribbon. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't talking. She just pulled at the white ribbon with one hand, untaped the ends of the gold paper, and unfolded it carefully, almost methodically. Inside the box was something wrapped in tissue. My mom peeled it back, revealing a silver picture frame. Simple. Elegant. Inside the frame was a photo. I knew which photo it was before she turned it around. It was the last picture we had of my father, her husband, before he passed. In it, he was sitting in his recliner, holding a lira on his lap. She was about 4 at the time, wearing pajamas covered in little moons. She had one hand on his chest, and he was smiling down at her, his big weathered hand covering hers. It was one of the only times I ever saw him look truly at peace, and on the back of the frame, written in Alira's careful, crooked handwriting, were the words, "For Grandma." So she doesn't forget who taught me to be kind. I saw my mother's hands tremble. For the first time in, I don't even know how long, she looked like she didn't know what to do. Her mouth parted slightly, but no sound came out. Her shoulders sagged. Her chest rose and fell with a shaky breath. Kaylin leaned forward to see what was in the box. When she did, she froze too. Alira just stood there. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't looking for praise or approval. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She was simply giving love where she felt it was needed most, even if it hadn't been earned, even if it wouldn't be returned. And in that moment, something shifted, not just in the room, but in me. I had been quiet for too long. I had been afraid of standing up to my mother, afraid of being seen as dramatic or ungrateful or too emotional. But my daughter wasn't afraid. She stood there in the face of rejection and still chose to offer love. And my mother, this woman who had spent her whole life trying to teach strength by withholding softness, was suddenly exposed by a 7-year-old who gave more grace in 5 seconds than most adults do in a lifetime. She didn't say thank you. She didn't cry. She didn't speak at all. But she held that frame in both hands and stared at it like it was the first real thing she'd seen in years. And for the first time since we'd walked into that house, I didn't feel invisible. I felt like something had cracked open. Maybe not enough to change everything, but enough to change something. No one spoke. The air in the room felt thick, like it had weight to it, like the truth in Alira's gift was pressing down on every single one of us. My mother sat at the head of the table, staring at the photo in her hands. Her fingers traced the silver frame. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Alira. She just stared at my father's face, his warm, crooked smile, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners, how happy he looked with Alira in his arms. He used to call her his little moonbeam. I think that was the last time I ever heard him laugh like he meant it, holding her in that chair, humming old jazz songs under his breath while she clutched a stuffed bear to her chest. My mom blinked, still silent. Her jaw was clenched like she was fighting something inside herself. Grief, maybe. Or guilt. Or both. Kaylin was still sitting with her fork halfway to her mouth, frozen mid-bite, staring at the frame like it was something radioactive. She didn't say anything either. It was Alira who broke the silence. She stepped forward just one little step and said gently, "I made the note by myself. I know the letters are kind of wobbly, but I didn't want help." My mom finally looked up, and something in her eyes cracked. Not completely, not like a dam breaking, but like the first fracture in ice after a long, cold winter. "I remember this day," she said, her voice low and hoarse. "Your grandfather had been having a bad week, but that day," he smiled. "All because of you." Alira smiled just a little. She nodded like she already knew that. I wanted to speak. I felt like I should say something, but I couldn't. I was afraid anything I said would break the spell. And then, in a voice so faint I almost missed it, my mother whispered, "I forgot what that kind of love felt like." Those words hit the room like thunder. Not loud, but heavy, final, undeniable. She looked down at the plate of crushed ice still sitting in front of Alira. Water had pooled around the edges, dripping onto the tablecloth. She reached out and slowly pushed it away. "I was trying to teach you a lesson," she said, still staring at the melting pile, "but I think you're the one teaching me." No one dared breathe. This woman, this iron-spined matriarch who never apologized, never admitted fault, never softened, was unraveling in front of us, not with tears, but with stillness. Her posture changed. Her voice lost its edge. She looked smaller. Elira, without a hint of judgment, walked over to her and gently placed a hand on her arm. My mother flinched, just slightly, like she wasn't used to being touched with kindness. Then, without thinking, Marion reached over and placed her free hand over Elira's. Not a full embrace, not a sweeping gesture, just a small, unspoken acknowledgement that something had shifted, that this child, who had just been denied cake, mocked in silence, humiliated in front of family, had responded with love, not bitterness. That's what made it powerful. It wasn't the photo, it wasn't the frame, it was the message behind it. I remember who loved me. I remember who was kind. I want you to remember, too. Kaylin stood up suddenly and walked into the kitchen, muttering something about needing water. Maybe it was too much for her. Maybe she just didn't know how to exist in a moment where she wasn't the center. I didn't follow her. I stayed where I was, watching my daughter do what none of us had been brave enough to try: heal, with nothing more than a quiet act of grace. That moment didn't fix everything. It didn't erase years of cold shoulders and harsh words and broken boundaries. But it was the first time I saw a real crack in my mother's armor. And all it took was a framed photo, a handwritten note, and the kindness of a 7-year-old who still believed people could change even after they'd hurt her. It was more than a gift. It was a mirror. And we were all seeing ourselves for the first time in a long, long while. We didn't stay long after that. Kaylin didn't come back from the kitchen for a while. I think she needed a moment to collect herself, or maybe to decide how she felt about not being the one everyone was looking at for once. The room never really returned to normal, whatever that even meant. There was too much silence, too many unspoken things hovering between us, but it wasn't the tense kind of silence I'd grown used to in that house. It was quieter, softer, like someone had just taken a long, deep breath after years of holding it in. I gathered our things slowly. Elira slipped her hand into mine like she always does when she's ready to go. My mom was still holding the framed photo, her eyes drifting between it and Elira like she was trying to memorize the connection. As we walked toward the door, she stood up. "Talia," she said quietly, and I turned. Her voice was different. No edge, no weight behind it. Just a woman trying, maybe for the first time in years, to speak without armor. "She's good," she said, nodding at Elira. "She's a good girl." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. "She gets it from her grandfather," my mom added, almost like she needed to explain it. "No," I said. "She gets it from being loved." There was no reaction from her at first, no smile, no comeback, just stillness. But that silence, that unspoken acknowledgement, was more honest than any apology she could have offered. On the drive home, Elira hummed to herself in the back seat. She looked out the window, watching the sun drop low over the houses. I could tell she felt lighter, like she had done what she needed to do. "You okay, baby?" I asked after a while. She nodded. "I think Grandma's sad." I hesitated. "She might be." But she was holding the picture really tight, she said. "That means she liked it, right?" I smiled, eyes burning. "Yeah, sweetheart. I think it means she really, really liked it." Elira leaned her head against the window, still holding her hands in her lap. "Good," she whispered. "I didn't want her to feel alone." And that was it. No bitterness, no complaint about the plate of ice, no mention of the way everyone ignored her. Just love. Quiet, persistent love. That night, after I tucked her in, I sat alone in the kitchen and cried. Not because I was angry, not even because I was hurt, but because I realized that my daughter had done what I'd spent most of my life trying and failing to do. She had shown my mother who we really were, and she did it without yelling, without demanding recognition. She did it by offering love to someone who didn't know how to accept it. She did it by being herself, pure, kind, and brave. A few days later, something strange happened. I got a phone call from my mom. She never calls me. Usually it's Kaylin passing along the information, or one of those half-hearted, "you should stop by sometime" texts that never turn into anything. But she called, and after a long pause, she said, I was thinking maybe Alara would like to come over sometime. Just her and me. Maybe we could bake a cake. I sat there, stunned, not just by what she said, but by how carefully she said it. Like she knew how easy it would be to say the wrong thing again, but this time, she was trying not to. I asked Alara later if she wanted to. She lit up. Really? Grandma wants to bake with me? She does, I said, and I think she wants to learn. Alara gave me this tiny smile, the kind that told me she'd already forgiven everything, and I realized something important that day. It's easy to confuse toughness with strength. My mother thought she had to be hard to survive. But Alara showed us all that real strength is in being gentle when you've been hurt. It's in staying kind when the world gives you a reason not to be. My daughter taught my mother how to remember love, and she reminded me that I didn't have to repeat the pain I came from. I could raise something softer, something better. Sometimes the smallest person in the room carries the heaviest truth, and sometimes a plate of ice is the thing that melts the heart you never thought could change. That's the story of how my daughter, just 7 years old, reminded 3 generations of women what love is really supposed to look like. If this story moved you, if it made you think of your own family or someone who's shown you unexpected kindness, I hope you'll take a second to share it. Like the video if it meant something to you. Leave a comment. I read every single one. I'd love to hear about the moment you realized someone small made a big difference. And subscribe to the channel if you want more true human stories like this one, about life, love, mistakes, and healing. Thanks for watching. And hey, be the one who hands out love even when others hand you ice. I'll see you in the next one.